Well, great leadership doesn't happen by accident. It starts with leading yourself, but it doesn't stop there. The best leaders develop others, build teams, and create cultures where leadership thrives at every level of the organization. But here's the challenge. Many leaders of churches and nonprofits struggle to build a true leadership pipeline. And that's why today's conversation on the Slingshot Group podcast is so important. Well, hey everyone, I'm Tim Foote, CEO of Slingshot Group, where we help you build remarkable teams through staffing and coaching. And for today's conversation, I'm joined by my friend Mac Lake, a leadership coach, trainer, and author of the Discipling Leaders series. And his latest book, Leading Yourself, is all about developing the character and competency to lead yourself, to do just that. But Mac's impact goes far beyond that. He's spent years helping churches and organizations build strong leadership pipelines and create teams that last. Well, Mac, it's always a privilege to talk leadership with you. Welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thank you so much, Tim. I've been looking forward to this conversation with you. Got to hang out with you in Atlanta not long ago. And man, it's always great to hang out with you.
Oh, you too. And I said the only thing better than this would be being in person together today. But thank goodness for technology. And also the old way, snail mail, I got my copy of your new book, Leading Yourself. Loving working through this. And impressive, John Maxwell wrote the foreword. And in writing the foreword, he actually shares a story that you shared with him about you, and the blunt feedback that some people shared about your leadership, I guess, early on in your career. Would you share that story and the impact that it had on you, Mac?
I will. Yeah. So I was sitting with John at lunch a few months ago, and I said, John, I just wrote this last book in the series, and I said, I want to dedicate it to you. And but I want to tell you why I'm dedicating it to you. I said, you changed my life when I was 29 years old. And I said, I've never told you this story. I said, when I was 29, I was working in ministry, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I was a youth pastor. A group of parents came to me, and they sat down in my office. It wasn't one person. I mean, it's like they sent a cohort of people.
No pressure.
Yeah. I said, this is an intervention here. This isn't just a confrontation. It's an intervention. And they sat down with me and they said, Mac, we love you. We love you. We know you love our kids. You're a great guy. You're just not a good leader. And you're not leading well. And you're not using your volunteers, and you're not here's what you're doing wrong. And Tim, it was done in love. It was done in love. And so I recognized, wow, I've got so much to learn in leadership. And it's really, it sparked a fire in me to go, you know what, I've got to learn how to lead. And so I started searching, and I found this John Maxwell conference. And I didn't know who John Maxwell was at that point. And so I went to this Maxwell conference. It was a 3-day conference. Into day one, my hand's hurting. I'm writing so much. I'm learning so much. And he did a session that day on personal growth and leading yourself and how to build a personal growth plan. And at the end of the day, he said, hey, I've got a personal growth kit that I've designed for you. I promise it will change your life. And it's 100 audio tapes on leadership, 12 of my favorite books, and a 365-day journal. And for $500, you can get this kit, and it'll change your leadership. And I was drooling, Tim. I was like, I want this so bad. But, I was young. I was making $18,000 a year. We had a baby in diapers. I was like, I can't afford this. I went back to the hotel room, told Cindy about the day, and told her about this growth kit. And she said, did you get it? And I said, no, I didn't get it. We can't afford it. We don't have $500. She looked at me, she said, Mac, how do you ever expect to grow others if you're not willing to invest in yourself? Ooh. Go back tomorrow and get that kit, and God will make a way. We'll figure it out. And so, Tim, the next day I went back and I bought that kit. And over the next 60 days, I listened to all 100 tapes. I read all the books. I started going through the journal. I started making my way back through those tapes again and again and again. And that personal growth plan kit literally changed the trajectory of my life and my leadership. And so that's why I sat down with John. I said, hey, these books, this Discipling Leaders book series wouldn't be possible without your investment in me. And I said, you didn't know who I was, but you were investing in me, and it's produced this. And he was so kind. He said, man, I love that. I want to write the foreword of that book. And so I sent it to him. He read it and said, yeah. And he put the foreword together for us. And so just so thankful for that.
What an amazing story, Mac, listening to that, of how Cindy led you.
Yeah.
And how important it is to invest in your own leadership. You could have just been reactionary to that group, that cohort, that intervention that happened in your office, but you weren't. You listened and you got better. Can you imagine if you hadn't listened, where your leadership would be today, and just how God has used not only your self-awareness, which you received that day, Mac, but also your humility, and how that's blessing so many other leaders.
Thank you. You know, I discovered that importance of leading yourself. Here's what I've discovered, Tim. Growing people grow people. I developed this, the very first guy I ever raised up as a small group leader. And I spent time raising him up, developing him, said, okay, we're going to send you out. You're going to start your group next week. And we sat down together at lunch one day, and his group was starting like a couple of days later. And he said, Mac, what if people in my group don't grow? And I said, David, don't worry about it. Growing people grow people. If you just keep growing, and this is one of the keys to leading yourself, is just that relentless pursuit of personal growth, always growing. So you're leading from an overflow. I see so many leaders who've stopped reading, they've stopped listening, they've stopped growing. And so they go into their business, they go into their nonprofit, they go into their church, and they're trying to lead people, but there's a staleness about it. And they keep saying the same old things again and again and again. And there's no fresh bread coming out of their soul because there's no fresh intake going into their soul. And so we've always got to be growing. Tim, my area of expertise is leadership development. And I was I was doing a leadership pipeline training one day in an organization. I did 8 hours of training, taught from my script. I've taught that script a million times, and I went and I got in the car. I was driving home, and God whispered in my soul, and he said, Mac, you didn't say one thing today that you've never said before. And I was so convicted. And that's when I realized, Tim, I'd stopped growing because I was good enough. That was good. I've read more than anybody I know on leadership development. I've thought about it. I've practiced it. I've invested years and years and years into this. And then all of a sudden it hit me, I'm not growing in this area anymore. And so what I did, I said, I'm going to reset. I'm at a 401 level when it comes to leadership development. I'm going to reset my 401 level down to a 101 level. And God, I promise you, I'm going to work harder and I'm going to grow to that next level, a new 401 level of leadership development. But it means I got to talk to people I've never talked to. I've got to study and read things I've never read. I've got to be exposed to different environments I've never been exposed to. I love what Solomon says in Proverbs chapter 2. I was reading this recently and it stumped me for a short moment. He's talking about wisdom. I think it's verse 4. And he says, search for wisdom as you would for silver. And the Hebrew word that he uses is explore. Explore for wisdom as you would for silver. And so there's this idea of an exploration. And it hit me. I was like, wait a minute. Are there silver mines in Israel? He's writing this from Jerusalem. Are there silver mines? And so I Googled it. I was like, there's no silver mines in Israel. In the first century, they had copper mines. And copper mines were very easy to mine. And it was a valuable metal, but they would use it for tools, they would use it for utensils, they would use it for weapons, but it wasn't the best. And so Solomon is telling his audience, search for wisdom like you would silver. And in order to search for silver, you have to go out of your familiar territory And mining for silver was more difficult than copper. So that means you've got to go a further distance and you've got to dig deeper in order to learn and continue to grow if you want to get wisdom. I think a lot of leaders stop and they get knowledge. And so they stop drilling and they never hit the wisdom. And so I tell 20-year-olds, hey, study broad, study everything, but when you're 30, start to narrow and now start to dig deeper instead of broader.
Yeah. Your story, Mac, it reminds me of what a mentor used to say to me. If you want to grow, go new places, meet new people.
Yeah.
And as long as there's breath in our lungs, we need to keep growing. I learn most from you when you talk about what you're learning and how you're growing. Because truth is, we don't do the saving, God does. We don't do the growing of other leaders, God does. We do the leading of other leaders. And that's what you do so amazingly well, Mac. This book you just finished is the last book in your Discipling Leader series, right?
It is, correct.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the series.
Oddly enough, I did not write the book series in the right order. Okay. So
like Star Wars, our producer was saying earlier.
Yeah.
And that worked.
So it worked. Yeah. And now that it's done, I'm okay with it. It bothered me for a while, but here's what happened, Tim. I teach organizations, business, nonprofits, and churches how to build a leadership pipeline. Leadership pipeline, every organization needs one, okay? And most organizations are going to be a 5-level pipeline. It starts with leading yourself. That's the majority of the people in your organization. You want to identify who those people are, and you want to develop them into the leadership character and competencies to lead others. And then you want to take those people that are leading groups or teams. You want to find those individuals who you believe can excel and have more potential to lead at a higher level and develop those to lead leaders. And there's certain competencies they need. It's different than leading others, at different level competencies. And then you take those and you raise those up to lead a department. And then you take those and raise them up to lead the organization. So it's a 5-level pipeline. So I wrote the books that include 32 competencies and 32 character traits. And so each competency is paired strategically with a character trait. So in other words, like one of the competencies is navigate conflict. Okay. It's paired with patience. I can teach somebody the skill of navigating conflict, but when I pour the character trait of patience on top of it, it supercharges that competency. So the series is written very strategically to help any organization raise up leaders at different levels of the pipeline. But I wrote leading leaders first because that's where everybody I was working with, they needed that level of content so bad because they don't have that level. Then I went back and I wrote leading others. Then I went and wrote lead department, then lead the organization, and never planned on writing leading yourself. And so a little over a year ago, I get a text from a pastor friend of mine. He said, when are you going to release leading yourself? I said, I'm not. I said, there's plenty of good content out there on basic discipleship. The world doesn't need me to add anything to that. He said, no, I'm not looking for basic discipleship stuff like prayer, how to study your Bible, those sort of things. He said, I'm looking for pre-leadership stuff where people can really learn to lead themselves, like, how to live on mission, emotional intelligence, how to be a team player. It's those type of things I'm looking for. Well, Tim, it lit a fire in me. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's right. That's missing. Every team I talk to, I keep hearing people, boy, our team I wish my people had more emotional intelligence. I wish they knew how to be a team player. I wish they were more teachable. I wish they could understand the influence and how to influence others. And so I put it out on Instagram and said, hey, what do you guys want in this book? And I gave a few examples and people started chiming in and I put 6 of those together. And so it's a really a pre-leadership book to teach you how to lead yourself well.
It's interesting, Matt, because I think leading yourself is almost like the sleeping giant. I think that you probably wrote these books out of order because of the felt need.
Yep.
but it's always that underlying need that we need to increase our self-leadership, because our greatest stewardship responsibility as leaders is ourselves. But you reference a lot in your work, Leadership Pipeline. And we're obviously, being a staffing company, we are looking at pipeline all the time, which is why we love the work you do, because you're developing leaders, and that's helping us with the supply as we work with nonprofits, as we work with churches. We're seeing a lack of pipeline in crucial roles, like development directors and marketing directors in nonprofit organizations, like kids roles, students, worship, marketing directors, executive directors in churches. Are you seeing this same issue as well?
Oh, everywhere. Businesses, nonprofits, churches, I'm seeing it everywhere. And what's happened is, I believe we've gotten lazy in our American culture. And what we're doing is we go, I need a new leader. And so we start scanning the landscape and going, oh, that person's not ready. That person's not ready. That person's not ready. And then we find somebody, oh, they're ready. And we take them and we put them in that leadership position and go, whoo, okay, I just developed a new leader. No, you didn't. That's not leadership development. That's leadership placement. And there's a huge difference between the two. And the American Christian culture in America has defaulted to leadership placement, not leadership development. Really, the core issue, I don't care if you're a business, nonprofit, or church, the core issue is we're not discipling leaders to live and lead like Jesus. That's what this book series is about. It's I got a Chick-fil-A operator. He is so pumped about this book series because, like, he wants to raise up. He's got his pipeline. He's got his his front of the cash register type of person. He's got a shift manager. He's got a store manager. He's got his operator, and he's got his pipeline clear. But now this gives them content. They can begin to develop leaders at the various levels instead of just having to find leaders and place leaders.
Yeah, Mac, in the organizations we go into, our kingdom first priority is always to encourage them to develop their bench, because sometimes we can be part of the problem because people assume that we're a candidate factory. And actually the factory is the organizations.
It is.
Are the nonprofits, are the businesses, are the churches that are developing leaders that are going to continue to grow, either internally or outside in another organization. We're connectors, we're ministry connectors, but we have to take the responsibility as organizations, even internally at Slingshot, to develop leaders within. And we could spend this whole podcast talking about that and all kinds of other things, Mac, but I want to throw at you some situations so you can give us some coaching, some real-time coaching and advice on how we can best handle it when these situations arise. You ready for that?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's jump in. So talk to the leaders who have someone on their team, Mac, who they'd love to lead others, but that team member is struggling in just leading themselves. Where should they start?
Okay. Yeah. Good. Great question. In leading themselves, I would say they need to start with a commitment to personal growth, a commitment, be a relentless, have a relentless commitment to personal growth. This is the thing I love about Jesus. When we look at Jesus and we think about who Jesus is when he was walking on earth, okay, we think about who he was, okay, we go, oh yeah, and we think about his character. We go, oh my goodness, Jesus was loving, he was bold, he was compassionate, he was forgiving. We list all these things, but there's another trait that you never hear listed. You never hear listed is Jesus was a learner. Yeah. He was a learner. We got to remember that.
Questions.
Oh my goodness, Jesus came. He wrapped his deity in humanity, and so he veiled his deity as he walked on earth. And so we never think about this. Jesus had to learn to read. He had the very book he wrote. He had learned to read. He had learned to write. He had learned to walk. He had learned to talk. He had to learn Bible stories, because his deity was veiled. And so I love the story in when Jesus was 12 years old. He was in the temple and he was dialoguing with the best teachers. He had stayed behind after Passover, because after Passover, the best teachers in the country stayed behind. It was like a one-day Bible conference, And so Jesus knew that. He was aware of that. So he's like, I'm not missing this. And so he stayed behind and he dialogued with those guys. Of course, mom and dad come along and say, hey, get yourself home, boy. And, but we know at that point, he knew who he was. He knew he was God. He said, I had to be in my father's house. And so, and what's fascinating is Luke tells us what happens after that. Okay. He submits himself to Joseph and Mary, and he goes back to Nazareth, a little village of 100 to 200 people, sitting on top of a mountain in seclusion. He goes back into isolation and seclusion for 18 more years and submits himself. And what's he doing? Luke tells us. It says he continued to grow in his wisdom and the other things, but when he's continued to grow in his wisdom. Now, that Greek word means to hammer out a hot piece of iron in order to lengthen it. So Jesus continued to grow and hammer out his learning. If somebody loves to lead, but they're not leading themselves well, then they're not going to lead well long. Okay. Because I still believe that leaders are readers. Leaders are people who are constantly growing. If you are leading and you're not growing, I promise you, you will not be leading well for long. You will not be relevant for long because you've grown stale. And so be committed to that personal growth. That would be one of the biggest things that I would advise.
Oh, that's great inventory to take personally as our leaders are listening today is, are you growing? Oh, okay, Mac, for the next one. For the leader who is leading themselves well but has never led a team and had people reporting to them or looking to them for leadership, what do they need to focus on to be ready to lead others?
I would say find a mentor. Find somebody that can mentor you because their materials are great. Mentors are better. Material with mentors are maximize your growth. And so that's what you want to leverage. You want to leverage both. You want to read. You want to find a mentor, talk to people and ask questions, dig in, but you've got to learn how to build a team. You've got to learn how to lead different personalities. You've got to learn how to provide feedback and accountability. In a church setting, if you're leading, you've got to know how to disciple people. You got to know how to. I'm shocked, Tim, at how many people are on church staff that do not know how to make disciples. And if you're on a church staff, you should be one of the lead disciple makers in your church. And so, how to solve problems, how to make decisions. And so just what I would do if I was a young leader, I would ask a mentor and say, hey, what are the 5 most important leadership skills I need in order to get a good start and be successful? And then look at that person and say, can I watch you do it? And will you teach me that? And will you tell me what books to read, what content to read? Would you help me build a growth plan and hold me accountable to it? So many times what we do is we throw people in the swimming pool of leadership without any development. And there's a big splash and big commotion and they're in that swimming pool of leadership for a season, but then they crawl out and they look at that swimming pool of leadership and they go, that almost killed me. I almost drowned. I'm never getting near the swimming pool of leadership again. And the reason I believe one of the reasons we have a recruitment problem today is for that very reason. It's been leadership development malpractice by our existing leaders, by taking somebody that go, hey, look, I think they got potential, and we throw them in without the development. It's fascinating that in 28 AD, 21 months into Jesus' public ministry, he goes up on a mountain, he prays all night long. And now at this point, his popularity is skyrocketing. So he goes up on a mountain in Luke 6 and he prays all night long. And it says, and he prayed without ceasing. It's the only time that's used of Jesus, prayed throughout the night without ceasing. Why? Because he's getting ready to make the most strategic decision of his public ministry. So he comes down the next morning and Luke says he calls all of his disciples to himself. How many? We don't know. But it was the height of his popularity. Could have been hundreds, could have been thousands. And Luke says, and from among them, he chose 12 apostles. And so he labeled them apostles. Now, I don't have time to get into that word, but it's a fascinating word. And one way I used to describe it is they're culture shapers. So it's a different level of leadership than just a disciple, different level of leadership. And then what does he do? When you study through that summer and fall of 28 AD, he does intense apprenticing with these guys. I mean, it is intense. In those 6 months, Tim, he is teaching them leadership skills, not basic discipleship, leadership skills. And then in Luke 9, it says he called his apostles together and he gave them authority and power. Mm-hmm. And so he selected them in Luke 6. He gave them authority 6 months later in Luke 9. He gave them authority and power. So his process is select, equip, and empower.
Yeah.
We got to do more of that.
We can learn so much more from the example of Jesus and how he developed his pipeline, his team, his leaders. You talked about those five skills. You know, often when we're coaching leaders stepping into a new organization, we say, hey, identify the 5 values you want to be known for, because people make up their mind about you in the first 6 months. And after that time, it's really hard to unmake people's minds up about you, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So speak to the up and coming leader who has the potential to lead at a high level on the team and organization. I love what you just said about people getting essentially promoted out of their gifting. It's like the Peter principle. Yeah. So I'd love you to speak to those up and coming leaders who have that potential to lead at a high level on the team and the organization. What competencies or traits do you look for to know when you should give this person a chance to lead at a higher level, so you're not committing what you talked about, and that is leadership pipeline malpractice?
Yeah. So good. So yeah, for that person that's up and coming and they're not there yet, what I would look for is I would say, okay, what level of the leadership pipeline are they currently at? And what are your leadership competencies you expect of them at that level? And are they doing those well? And that's one thing I would look for. I'd also look for teachability and humility. And then I would begin to take that person and say, all right, like, for example, some of the things I would want to work with a young leader on, moving them up to that next level, would be time management, communication, how to lead meetings, very practical things, how to lead meetings, how to coach other people. A lot of times, upper level leaders, they just don't know how to coach people. They don't do one-on-ones with their team. If they do one-on-ones, they don't know what to do with those one-on-ones. So when we're moving somebody up and they're beginning to lead a team of leaders or leaders of leaders, man, they really need to have it dialed in how they're managing their time. Otherwise, here's what happens if they don't. They end up with the title of leading a department, but they're functioning either at the team member level or leader level. I'm sure you see this all the time as well. Yeah. And so we promote somebody up to a new level of leadership, but they keep functioning at the prior competencies. And what we want to do is no. I want to teach you how to lead meetings so that you're empowering people. I'm going to teach you how to manage your time so that you are leveraging your time to bring the biggest kingdom return on investment in the way you use your time, and helping them understand that when I'm leading at that level, I'm not just responsible for managing my time and my gifts. I'm responsible to steward the time and gifts of all those under me. Am I helping them leverage their time? Am I helping them leverage their strengths so that they are bringing the best to the organization as well? What I do something called pulse check with my team, and we'll do this, about 3 times a year. And so I send them a list of about 6 or 7 questions. We mix the questions up, and it is what it says it is. It's a pulse check. And so, hey, what do you love about your job right now? What does your family say about your job right now? Are they loving you in this role? Do they feel like you're stretched too far? Things like that. What percentage of your time are you operating in your strengths? And if it's less than 80%, what can I do to help you get back into that 80% zone of where you're using your strengths? What are you doing, or what am I doing that you want me to keep doing? What am I doing that you want me to stop doing? And so it's questions like that. It's not a performance review. It's a pulse check. And really, if it is a performance review, it's a performance review on me of how well I'm leading you. And so young leaders need to learn that so that they can maximize their team and expand their impact versus trying to be a doer.
I love the pulse check idea, Mac, and you reference what we hear in the work that we do, and as we gather executive leaders, they so often say we just need to teach the leaders that are up and coming more management skills, which is actually what you just referred to,
Yeah.
is how to manage well your time, how to manage meetings, and back to how to manage yourself. So the next question I have for you is about the top leaders of organizations, where there is so much responsibility that falls on their shoulders. What are some practical things they can do to build and maintain a leadership development culture in their organization?
Ooh. Okay. Number one, you have to value it. It has to be a value. I see so many upper level leaders who give a command or a charge for the team to develop leaders, but then they take their eye off the ball and they don't measure it. There's no accountability. And if that's the case, if I say, hey, we need more leaders, I notice a problem. Hey, we need more leaders around here. Y'all need to do leadership development. Okay. And I'm speaking out of a pain point, not a priority. Okay. So that tells them I'm just trying to solve a problem. It's not a continual value of mine. Okay. And so first I have to value leadership development and when I value it, I talk about it differently. Because if I don't value it, I talk about it as a solution to a problem. If I value leadership development, I talk about it as a lifestyle and a necessary responsibility to extend the health and vision and mission of our organization. So I have to place a high value on it. Number two, I have to model it. Here's what we have to realize. Culture flows down. It doesn't flow up. All right. And so what happens? I go into organization. They go, oh, we don't have enough volunteers. We don't have enough leaders. And they want to start at the point of pain, but we need to start at the point of influence. And so what happens? I'll go into a company and I'll find out, oh, we need leadership development. Well, are you doing leadership development with your team up here? No, we're not, but we need to do it down here. Well, no, you need to do it up here because culture flows down. It doesn't flow up. So you have to be a model of it. The third thing is you have to expect it. You just have to expect it. I remember I was, when I was at Seacoast, I was campus pastor at the Long Point campus, and I had a high capacity volunteer come in my office and sat down with me and said, hey, I understand our youth pastor is leaving and I want to apply for that job. And I said, oh, hey, well, let me interview you right now. And this is a great volunteer. I knew him well. So I knew I could say anything to him. I said, all right, what would you do if we made you the youth pastor? Oh, I'd hang out with the kids and I'd hang out with the boys and I'd go to their ball games and I would take them for ice cream, all this stuff. Talk for 20 minutes. I said, all right, listen, everything you just said is fantastic. I mean, that's why you're one of our best volunteers. All right. But not one time did I hear you talk about raising up adult leaders. All right. That's why you're not going to get this job. All right. Because you don't value leadership development. I'm not saying you can't get there, but this is not your next step. Right. So for your staff, you have to expect them to develop leaders. I love what Ram Charan says in his book, Leadership Pipeline. He says, put leadership development on the job description of everybody on your team, because everybody should be doing it. And so you have to expect it and bring accountability. And the last thing I would say, you got to fight for it. You got to fight for it. I hear it everywhere I go, Tim. People, oh, well, we're trying to develop leaders. We can't develop leaders. Well, people don't do this. People don't want this. Oh, people won't do this, whatever it is. And I go, do you hear what you're saying? You're accepting their excuses. And what you're doing in essence is you're taking a knee and giving up. And when you take a knee and give up, who's shaping the culture? Not you. It's the voices of your people shaping the culture, not you. And your job is to shape the culture of the organization or your department. So Stop taking a knee and stand up, write down the top 3 challenges that I do this with every organization. Let's identify the top 3 challenges that you're facing. And when it comes to leadership development, let's take one at a time and let's fight it. Let's throw some rocks at it like it's a Goliath, and let's get this thing out of our culture. Let's uproot it out of our culture. Let's take one at a time. And every time I have them do that exercise, they have phenomenal solutions.
Yeah.
It's just they don't execute them because they've taken a knee to the excuses.
That's so helpful. So much we could dig into and talk for about another hour, Mac, and we will at some point. But as we close, 2 quick questions that aren't related to what we just talked about, but I want to learn from you. What are you learning right now that is shaping your future leadership, Mac?
Oh, man. Oh, what I'm learning right now that shaped my future leadership. I'm 63 years old. Health has been a
Years young.
passion. Years young. Yep. Health has been a passion for me for years. But over the past 6 months, I had a blood result come back that shocked me. I thought, wait a minute, how in the world did I have a bad blood? Something in my blood came back bad, not dangerous, but bad. And I called a guy that I just met. He's a health coach type of guy. I said, hey, explain this to me. I do this, this, this. I eat this. I exercise every day. Explain this to me. He explained it to me. And man, Tim, this guy has become my health coach. And for some reason, he just sort of took me under his arm. He used to be a Justin Rutling chauffeur. He used to be a professional hockey health optimization coach. And so he's coaching me and my son Brandon right now. And so what I'm learning is as I'm dialing this in, even to a greater degree than I've ever understood, energy levels are skyrocketing, which means creativity is skyrocketing. And I'm going, wow. And vision is growing, not shrinking. I think for a lot of people, as we age, in your 20s, 30s, 40s, vision's big, 50s a little bit, but it can begin to diminish, not because of God's plan, but because of our energy. And so God's teaching me right now some new disciplines, and I thought I was pretty disciplined. He's teaching me some new disciplines. I've shared this with you before, but one of my life verses is Deuteronomy 34:8. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not weak, and his strength was not gone. Mm-hmm. And so when Moses died, he didn't die, but God didn't retire him because he was tired and worn out and sick and diseased. God retired him because his purpose was complete. But he died at full vitality. And so I want to do that because, one of the visions God's given me in my life is I want to be what I've termed as a super multiplier. And I want to raise up other super multipliers. And a super multiplier is somebody that develops leaders to the 4th generation. The 2 Timothy 2:2, reliable men. It's fascinating that what Paul told Timothy to do and picked reliable men, we think, oh yeah, somebody that's reliable, somebody that's got good character. Yeah, that's part of it. But he defines the reliability, who will teach others also. And so I'm looking for people who go, you know what? I want to be a super multiplier. And so that's the rest of my years. That's what I want to invest in. People who go, I'm passionate about leadership development, raising up kingdom leaders for the business sector, for the church, nonprofit, whatever. And I want to help equip them to become super multipliers. And let's see what impact we can make for God's kingdom by being highly committed to leadership development.
That's so good, Mac. And as you talk about a health coach, it makes me think that I'm most creative. I'm a runner, so I run 3 to 5 times a week. Not a long way, but I'm often most creative when I'm running. And I was talking to a colleague recently who was commenting on the steps in my house, and his mother-in-law is a geriatric doctor, and he said, as people age, she says the biggest problem is they stop walking.
Yeah.
And they moved to a house with no stairs.
No stairs.
And he said, you got to keep moving. You got to keep walking. And of course, my mind flipped to spiritually. You got to keep walking with Jesus. You've
Ooh,
got to keep learning. You've got to keep growing. You've got
yeah.
to keep investing in your spiritual journey. So, last question. And this kind of tags on the last time we had you on the podcast, and we had you and Brandon on
Yeah.
together. And that was such a great experience. What's God teaching you now as a dad, as a father, and a grandfather that you would challenge us with today?
um, uh, as a father, keep championing your adult kids' dreams.
Mm,
Keep championing them. Don't be a criticizer, be a champion. It's as a parent, we are accustomed to guarding them when they're young,
right.
protecting them when they're young. You have to let go of that when they're adults. Your job is no longer to protect them. Okay. Your job is to champion them. So celebrate them, champion them. Stop correcting them. Stop trying to give them advice. They're going to do what that your own, if you do that, they're just going to push you away. And then with my grandkids, oh my goodness, we've got 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 4-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, and 10-year-old.
Woo.
And we're learning that, wow, I'm having to adapt the way I relate at different stages. When there was only a few of them, it was easy. They were all at the same stage. But now I'm having, I think on the last podcast, I said, if you value what they value, then they will grow up valuing what you value. And so I'm still practicing that, trying to value what they value, but trying to tune into how are they changing and how do I need to adapt to their changes and don't always relate to them the way that I did in the past, especially for the 8 and 10-year-old is I'm really learning that right now.
Oh, there's so much we learn about leading leaders through parenting and
Oh,
releasing our kids and releasing our grandkids. You know, Mac, I always learn so much chatting with you, and there's
mm,
so much here today in how we lead leaders, lead others, lead organizations, but how we lead ourselves and steward our own leadership. I'm sure those listening are doing a lot of self reflection while listening to this.
mm.
Tell us how we connect with you and the work that you're doing right now.
Yeah. You can go to multiplygroup.org and you can see all of our resources, all of our services, and then Mac Lake, MACLAKE 24 on Instagram,
Mm.
and Mac Lake on LinkedIn. I'm on there a lot as well. So would love to connect with anybody, answer any questions, and get to know some new friends.
And get this book and the others in the series, even though they were written out of order. It's amazing. Mac, thank you so much for blessing us and so many others today with this conversation. And I know there's so many things you as listeners can share with other leaders. So please do all the things, subscribe, share, and always, I say this and I mean it, and Mac models it, stay curious and reach for the remarkable.